interrupt your, but I'm calling to order this hearing of the Legislative Audit Commission. Today, we are pleased to receive formally in this meeting the report on the, and this is one of the first times I've ever seen a name of something that does not lend itself to an acronym. I mean, you have to say the whole thing. The MAWQCP, and I have found if you say it quick enough, you remember it. So without further ado, welcome to our hearing, Ms. Jody Munson Rodriguez, the Deputy Legislative Auditor. And you may begin. And we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair.
Excuse me again. Senator Jaskowski and Senator Dibble are online. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Rest. For the record, my name is Jody Munson Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for OLA's Program Evaluation Division. And I want to thank you all for having us here to talk about the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program. I dare you all to say that 3 times fast. As we all know, agriculture is a key industry in Minnesota's economy, but agricultural operations can have a negative impact on water quality. For that reason, Minnesota's more than 100,000 agricultural producers play an important role in protecting Minnesota's water resources. The Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program recognizes that role. It's a voluntary program that, per statute, certifies producers who demonstrate practices and management sufficient to protect water quality. I'm emphasizing that statutory language, demonstrate, because as Ms. Zanoni-Wells will explain, we found that the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has regularly certified producers who commit to implementing certain practices, but who have not yet demonstrated that they have implemented them. And in some cases, we found that producers who have not followed through on implementing practices they committed to for the program. To be completely clear, our conclusion was not that the program does not have value. It's that the program's implementation does not always align with statute and that improvements can be made. Here to say more is Caitlin Zanoni-Wells, the Evaluations Manager.
Welcome. You may continue if you'll introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chair Rest. For the record, my name is Caitlin Zanoni-Wells, and I managed OLA's evaluation of the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program. For brevity's sake, I will refer to this as the program throughout this presentation.
Okay.
Thank you for asking us to present on our evaluation today. Before I get started, I would like to thank my team members, Will Harrison and Adri Lobitz, for their work on this report. Okay. In our report, we make several findings and recommendations to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the legislature. Key findings include program certifiers regularly certify producers to whom they have provided technical assistance despite the law prohibiting it, but this prohibition may not be practical. MDA certifies producers that have not met program standards, and the program's effect on water quality is not clear. Before providing details on these findings, I'll provide a brief introduction of the program. The Minnesota legislature established the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program as a pilot program in 2013 to certify agricultural producers whose practices protect water quality. The pilot phase ended in 2015 when the program began operating statewide. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture administers the program, and program certifiers located across the state implement it locally. Most program certifiers are staff at soil and water conservation districts. 1.1 million acres had been certified as of the end of fiscal year 2025. The map on this slide shows the number of acres certified in each county at that time. Over 1,600 agricultural producers across Minnesota had been certified also at the end of fiscal year 2025. The program is primarily funded by appropriations from Minnesota's Clean Water Fund. The legislature appropriated $32 million total from the fund from fiscal years 2014 through 2025. In fiscal year 2025, the legislature appropriated $3.5 million to this program. I'd like to give a brief overview of the certification process. This is a voluntary program, so certifiers begin working with producers after the producer expresses interest in becoming certified. The producer fills out an application for the program, then the certifier works with the producer to conduct an initial assessment of the producer's operation. This initial assessment involves meeting with the producer to discuss their operation and conducting a field verification. The certifier enters the producer's information into the program's assessment tool and determines whether the producer meets the program standards. If the producer does not meet the program standards, the certifier may suggest changes to the producer's operations that would make them eligible for the program. Producers who are eligible for certification sign a certification agreement and remain certified for 10 years as long as they comply with the terms of that agreement. Around 4 years into certification, MDA conducts an audit of the producer called a mid-certification review to ensure that the producer continues to comply with program standards. During the 10 years of certification, the producer may receive the following benefits: public recognition, access to technical and financial assistance, and regulatory certainty, which means that they will be deemed in compliance with new state water quality laws and rules that arise during this 10-year period. We surveyed certified producers in fall 2025, and they generally reported positive experiences working with program certifiers. A large majority of certified producers who responded to our survey said that certifiers were a helpful resource throughout the certification process, and over 90% agreed that staff had clearly communicated with them about certification. As part of facilitating the certification process, program certifiers provide assistance to producers to help them implement changes that protect water quality. This assistance might look like notifying producers about cost share opportunities they can pursue or recommending that they make changes to their operations, such as changing tillage practices. Many certified producers that we surveyed reported that such assistance is an important benefit of the program. However, per requirements and statutes, program certifiers are prohibited from certifying producers to whom they have provided technical assistance.
Excuse me, have there been attempts in the past to, and maybe those of you who've served on the ag committees would know, to lift that prohibition or to further define it so that it meets the actual helpful practice?
Thank you for the question, Chair Rest. There have been no changes to the statutes governing this program since it was established in 2013. So I don't know if there have been attempts, but there have been no changes to the law.
I think some are coming. Go ahead.
We found that certifiers regularly certify producers to whom they have provided technical assistance despite this law. But the prohibition in law may not be practical. We conducted site visits across the state and saw certifiers advising producers naturally when discussing their operations. In some farms we visited, the certifier discussed a range of options for the producer to consider to address a water quality concern in their operation. These conversations may be considered technical assistance, and delaying them until another certifier is available could be disruptive and cause delays in the certification process. The legislature has not updated the program's authorizing statutes since the program was established in 2013. We found that the statutory provision related to technical assistance, as well as some other provisions, which we discuss further in the report, may not be necessary.
I have another question about that. When this program evaluation was suggested and you were going through the process of what to look at, I shouldn't assume, you looked at what the current law said. Did you notice at that point that that technical assistance was prohibited? Did you know that going in before you started examining what actually was happening.
We did conduct a review of the legal requirements for this program as it was selected for evaluation.
And
So
was-
yes, at the beginning of the program, we
And
were
was
aware.
that part of the description of the topic itself? Do you understand what I mean?
If I may, Chair Rest.
Ms. Munson
Thank you.
Rodriguez.
When we present the Legislative Audit Commission with information about a topic for their review before determining whether they will select it, it is a pretty high-level version of information. So while we present largely information on the selection criteria, we don't typically provide detailed information about the legal requirements of each program.
So Ms. Munson Rodriguez, so legislators or those who were proposing this topic, some of them likely knew the prohibition about technical assistance and were aware that it was being given anyway. Would you say that's an accurate description of the situation? Or were, when you started going into it further, did you find that legislators were already aware and knew that this practice was there? And I can see Representative Hansen has his hand up. Do you have any information on that?
Well, Madam Chair, I think we've listened before with charter schools on self-certification, and a whole raft of them over the years we've been here, where there's self-certification or not having the independent third-party certification. So I think there's been, and maybe the auditor could correct me if I'm wrong there, but I think in a variety of areas across agencies, we have flagged concerns about if somebody is validating something, do they have a stake in it, or are they truly an independent way? And I think as we've gone through the last 4 years, that's also been raised, not just here.
I understand. I wanted to know about this particular topic. Did the people who were proposing it know that this kind of assistance was being given, or questioning it because it was prohibited in the law? Or did they understand that the general practice, notwithstanding what the language of the statute was, that this had been developed as a very practical, commonsensical way of proceeding with this certification? Any comment or what you found, or what was your experience when you were talking with people, various stakeholders or members of the department or whatever?
Thank you, Chair Rest, for the question. I don't believe we heard anyone flag this as a concern before this, as we began our initial scoping conversations at the beginning of this project. I will say that we reviewed hearings, recordings of hearings from the 2013 legislature discussing this program before it was established in law, and it was definitely a source of concern and discussion at that time. So I think it has been raised that some of the rationale behind why this was introduced into law, but I don't know that there have been recent concerns about it.
And I do recall in another program evaluation we had during the year, the DNR was looking at we were looking at some programs from the DNR, and the same general issue, to piggyback on Representative Hansen's comment, the same general answer, situation was also discovered, but also what seemed to be the case was a need for a change in the actual law rather than that those that were carrying it out were scofflaws. That was just not the case. So I think that's an important point, even though clearly the language says that that kind of assistance, there's no doubt about the fact that that kind of assistance was not to be permitted by the department itself. So I just want to clear that up, and we'll hear from the department later as well. Ms. Munson Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair Rest. Just to bring kind of our attention to some other pieces in the report. We, of course, at OLA are always concerned with conflicts of interest. It's something we look at in a lot of our projects. One of the reasons we flagged this one for potential review by the legislature is we did find that the department has developed protocols for looking into conflicts of interest. They have sheets that are circulated and what we found were widely used. So that concern that we had was not necessarily that conflicts of interest were not being reviewed or being, acknowledged. It's that the way in which the program was formed and was being run were not kind of in alignment. So I just want to be clear that this is different from some of the other programs where we have found those issues.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Chair Rest. I don't know anything about this issue, but I
But
think,
you have questions anyway.
no, I think the goal is to clean the water, right? So the goal is to do what we can to get private entities to, do everything they can to clean water. And if that means that we're providing, technical assistance, frankly, we should be providing technical assistance, I would think, because that's going to help clean the water, which is the end goal. So I would hope that we look at this way, and those of you that will be here in the future.
Which is why I brought, maybe
Yes.
it's the law that should be changed.
Yes, I agree.
Not the fact that they give technical assistance.
Yep, thank you.
To me, is a major point. Representative Hans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to your question, so there's very few of us who were actually here when this happened, and it was controversial.
I don't recall.
Not the specific on the technical assistance, but on the program, because we have a whole system of soil and water conservation districts that have been working for decades. And there were people who said, why is this just duplicating what they're doing? And then we had folks who were, this was an idea that could give recognition, going back to the point of public recognition. Is that enough? Is peer pressure a motivating factor, or pride a motivating factor for implementing practices? But all of it, because it's all funded out of the Clean Water Fund,
Right.
does it meet the constitutional requirements to protect, restore, and enhance water and drinking water? And so that's the measurement, and having those outcomes. And there was great concern, and I think that's why the statute is there, about having a third party because is it just a gold star on your report? Is it just the gold star and an A+, or is it actually making a change?
A meaningful
A meaningful
designation.
change, yes.
Okay.
So that was the debate at the time, and that's just yesterday, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I have served on the Clean Water Fund, or the Clean Water, I don't know if it's a commission or what it is, and found that, not recently, but in years past, and found that a fascinating study, and the information that was being brought forward about the whole notion of what clean water even means. And then the various agencies and researchers and whatever that would report to that commission didn't seem to get a whole lot of attention, public attention, but the work they were doing was extraordinarily important. Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Rest. So not many of us were around. I was not in the legislature, but coincidentally, the program piloted not only in my county, but in my township. And full disclosure, I was the 6th farm in the state to become ag water quality certified.
Congratulations.
Thank you. As I'm looking at these slides, and I think Representative Anderson, I think you started to hit on it, program benefits. I never saw the program as benefiting the producer. The benefit is to the environment, to the
Right,
community.
to the community.
Cleaner water, cleaner environment. As many acres as we can get certified, the better it is for the community. When they tried to tell me, okay, you're going to get a sign, and I'm like, okay,
That star, huh?
I've got millions of dollars of cropland that I'm taking care of here, and I'm going to get a sign. It's like, I'm not doing it for the recognition, I'm doing it for the environment. And that's what I believe the other farmers are doing, and that's what I believe the MDA is doing. They're trying to get as much enrollment as they can, and we're not looking at it as individual credit.
Right, thank you. We could talk about this without even going any further up for a long time, but we'll go back to your presentation of the report.
Yeah, I think we will carry on. Essentially, our recommendation here is that we recommend the legislature update the program's authorizing statutes, and I think we've covered that. All right, after program certifiers meet with producers, they may identify changes that producers need to meet to meet program standards. We found that rather than wait for producers to make all changes prior to signing the certification agreement, MDA certifies producers that have not yet met the program standards. These producers are certified contingent on implementing or maintaining certain practices. We reviewed all certification agreements for 2 years, 2019 and 2025. For producers certified in 2019, over 90% of producer certification agreements listed one or more contingencies. In 2025, over 80% of certifications included a contingency. Contingencies in certification agreements vary widely. Some contingencies require a producer to install a new structure, like a grassed waterway, and others require a change in the producer's management practices, for example, by planting cover crops. Statutes state that certification is for producers who demonstrate practices and management sufficient to protect water quality. It is not clear that MDA's use of contingencies aligns with the program's authorizing law. Furthermore, producers do not always follow through on implementing the contingencies they agreed to implement. We reviewed whether producers certified in 2019 had implemented their contingencies by their mid-certification reviews, which generally occur 4 years or more after a producer is certified. Of the producers certified with contingencies in 2019, only about 1/2 had clearly implemented those contingencies. The remaining producers had either not implemented all of their contingencies, or it was unclear from MDA's documentation whether contingencies were implemented. MDA policies do not indicate what the next steps should be if a certifier finds that a producer has not implemented their contingencies. In most cases we reviewed, MDA allowed producers to remain certified when their mid-certification reviews revealed that they had not implemented contingencies. MDA staff and some certifiers told us they choose to work with producers to reach compliance rather than suspend their certification. MDA staff have indicated that contingencies help get producers to commit to making changes that will benefit water quality, but we found producers do not always follow through on those commitments. As previously discussed, statutes indicate that certification is for producers who demonstrate practices and management sufficient to protect water quality, not for those who promise to do so. Certifying producers before ensuring that they have made all changes needed to meet program standards risks that producers may not make those changes. And in the meantime, these producers receive program benefits while not making the changes program staff determined are needed to fully contribute to Minnesota's water quality. Certifying these producers who need to make changes to meet program standards lessens the significance of certification for producers who meet the standards at the time of certification. For these reasons, we recommend that MDA discontinue the practice of certifying producers with contingencies. Next, we discuss findings and recommendations related to the program's purpose and effects. The statutory purpose of the program is unclear. Potential purposes of the program include recognizing producers for their practices, increasing implementation of conservation practices, reducing water pollutants, and protecting water quality. While these purposes may be related, emphasizing one over another could have different results. For example, if the purpose of the program is to recognize producers, there may be a greater emphasis on certifying producers who have already implemented the required conservation practices. Meanwhile, if the purpose is to protect water quality, then MDA's emphasis might be on certifying producers who need to make changes to their operations in order to have greater environmental impact. Because the purpose is not well defined, identifying appropriate outcome measures is challenging. Regarding the program's outcomes, we found that the program's effect on water quality is not clear. MDA reports a number of outcomes for this program, including the number of certified producers, number of new conservation practices, and estimated pollutant reductions. But the outcomes MDA has reported do not capture the program's impacts on water quality. For example, the number of certified producers does not necessarily reflect whether these producers have impacted Minnesota's water quality because of the program. Our analysis of program data showed that many producers are already implementing practices that protect water quality before they seek certification. While these practices may be beneficial, they are not due to producers' involvement in the program. Additionally, as previously mentioned, many producers are certified with contingencies. So these producers are not necessarily implementing new practices that contribute to Minnesota's water quality until they implement the practices they committed to in their certification agreements. MDA has also reported pollution reduction estimates. However, these estimates capture projected impacts of conservation practices that producers implement rather than actual impact. Certifiers and MDA staff calculate these estimates using a number of estimation tools, which factor in things like geographic information for the area in which the practice was implemented. They enter information about the type of practice and the number of acres the practice is installed on. These tools provide an estimate of how much pollution reduction the practice should generate. They do not measure actual impact. Additionally, MDA's data on pollution reduction estimates have significant limitations. These figures are based on conservation practices implemented because of the program. However, certifiers do not always record accurate dates for when a conservation practice was first implemented. Because the implementation date affects the date when the estimated reductions began, estimates of the total amount of pollution these practices have reduced since they were implemented may not be reliable. Additionally, the program does not reliably record all practices that were implemented because of the program. MDA does not collect data through this program that would allow the agency to measure the program's actual impact on water quality. Although program certifiers collect extensive data from producers when determining whether they meet the program standards, this information does not include water quality tests like edge of field or tile line tests. Even if MDA were to collect this information, there are some limitations to how such monitoring data could show the program's impact on Minnesota's waters. For example, monitoring data may not be generalizable. It may be possible to see the immediate local effective practices implemented by certified producers based on runoff at the edge of their field, but by the time this water joins a river or lake, there could be a number of other sources contributing to the body of water's quality. It may be difficult to say whether changes to water quality are due to this program. Furthermore, monitoring water quality can be a relatively expensive activity.
Excuse me, Senator Jaskowski, did you have a question or comment at this point?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
I'm just curious to the presenter. You mentioned benefits to the farmer, and going back to Representative Jacobs' comment, and I don't remember. I do know that Representative Hanson and I were both in the legislature then, in the other body. In the body that.
And I was here in either one of the bodies, so by the way.
Okay, you were in one of them, Madam Chair. Okay. Well, anyway, so I don't remember all the specifics of putting this together, this program together back then and how it passed, but I do remember there was a strong flavor of effort to protect the environment, and I can only really see that as probably the motivation for the legislation when it did pass. But you mentioned that there was benefits accruing to the farmer or reference to benefits to the farmer. What are the benefits to the farmer that you noticed or documented in your audit?
I need to look back at your long name, sorry about that. Ms. Zanoni Wells.
Thank you, Chair Rest and Senator Drazkowski. The benefits that we discussed earlier is the public recognition, which comes in the form of a sign, as has been mentioned. Some producers may go to a farmer's market and list that they are ag water quality certified at their stall. There's the access to financial and technical assistance. So MDA does have a grant program associated with this, a scholarship program, and incentive payments for those who get a program endorsement. We don't go into endorsements during this presentation, but there's a little information in the report. So there are a number of benefits that are associated with certification for the producer. And then obviously regulatory certainty, as discussed previously.
Senator Drazkowski, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Rest. So somehow in this measurement criteria that we've gotten into, my initial understanding of the program was to just try to implement and protect the environment as much as we could. I didn't remember anything in the onset of this that we were going to be trying to figure out ways to measure this. I mean, there's a lot of things in the world that are tough to measure.
But you know it when you see it.
Yeah,
right?
yes. How much do we love each other? I mean, but so when I'm in my neighborhood and I have to pick on organic farmers because they are using mechanical methods to plow down weeds, and after a heavy rain, nothing there but black soil, and I see the gullies and runoff after a heavy rain. I can see it. I can see it's a terrible thing, but I can't measure it. But I know that if we implemented no-till or better practices, that wouldn't be happening. So I don't feel like the thrust of this program ever was to try to measure it. And coincidentally, when I started sitting on water resource boards all those 14 years ago, I started keeping a list of the amount of programs that are implemented in Minnesota. And this is something that you can't find anywhere, but I have more than 50 programs and organizations working on water in Winona County. When this particular program came forward, the first thing I told Mr. Redlin at the time was, it's another government program, and I didn't have much time for it.
See?
I saw the efficiencies of it, I saw the streamlining of it, and I think we need to move to less programs that are as efficient as possible. And this is the best implemented program I've seen out of all 50 of these. And I think we need to get into the One Watershed, One Plan, where that gets to be sevenfold the amount of money being spent, and we can't measure any of the outcome there. There's a lot more concerns there than there are here. This is a relatively small program, $3 million a year. It's getting an awful lot of scrutiny. It's doing a lot of good for the environment.
Thank you. Any other, Representative Hansen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Drazkowski, I remember you back then, and I think you might have wanted to vote for it, but didn't. But just, I think you wanted to back then. Senator Drazkowski, you may remember that Chair Wagenius at the time was actually mocked for bringing up outcomes all the time for years about we needed to have measurable outcomes, particularly for the legacy. So it actually became a kind of a mocking where and maybe Senator Rest, you may remember this too, but that because the focus was on outcomes. If we're going to
I have a selective memory.
If we're going to do special things with the Constitution, that we need to make sure they work. And that was consistent in the legislative debate on the intent is we need to have outcomes And I'll go back even further to something I was on, 1990. Commissioner Peterson's
keep
smiling. And it talks about outcomes in here, that we need to have outcomes in the Groundwater Protection Act. We need to measure outcomes in order to make sure that the public money that's being spent to protect the public waters and groundwater and drinking water is useful. And that's the concern why this audit was asked for. Is it working in terms of water quality? And we can focus on the details of process because we love process in Minnesota and we love tweaking process. But is it working to protect water quality?
Thank you, Representative Hanson. Anyone else? Representative Quam.
Thank you, and I may have been on the same committee the year that this passed, and, someone said, there weren't any benefits. My understanding looking at this, the benefits to landowners were informational and assistive in how to get to a better place. The debate on monitoring and other things, you need to combine things together so that if somebody for one of these programs is taking a well or water samples, that they cover the, not just one element they're looking for, but cover that short list. And that way we can see how things change. I grew up on a farm and we had to change to a different aquifer for our well. I was a kid at the time and, that wasn't a trivial process. But every time that happens, it'd be nice to keep track of the cause, the location, and the aquifer and see what things have they gotten better or worse. And as to some of the question marks of where they're doing things maybe beyond what the authorizing legislation, the things that would concern me, and if the testifiers can confirm, was there any fudging of documents, boxes checked but not really completed, or covering up something in the in other words, in the effort to help but not show they were helping, was there anything that wasn't accurate, shall we say? And that would be my concern, not so much that they gave more assistance than, was maybe dictated. Minnesota cares, and we try to help where we can. And we can maybe fix that in the legislature of, fixing that. I just want to make sure that everything that you saw was accurate and not fudged to cover up anything. Madam
Thank
Chair.
you. Ms. Anoni Wells, do you have a further comment on Representative Quam's remarks?
Chair Rest, Representative Quam, we did not observe any evidence of things being fudged or covered up in this program implementation. I think we reviewed the documentation we saw. We did not see evidence of that kind of activity.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Quam.
then I am happy that, unlike some programs, they didn't fudge things on a oops. And I'm also happy that when they maybe erred in assisting, they erred in assisting the people. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Quam. You may continue.
Thank you, Chair Rest. We make a number of recommendations to the legislature and to MDA regarding the program's purpose and outcomes. First, we recommend that the legislature clarify the program's purpose in statutes and identify intended outcomes. Second, MDA should address limitations in the agency's data on conservation practices and pollutant reduction estimates. Third, we recommend that MDA consider ways to incorporate water quality monitoring for a selection of certified producers. Although there are downsides to both estimating pollution reduction and monitoring water quality, stakeholders expressed an interest in seeing more from MDA than the reported pollution reduction estimates, especially given the limitations in MDA's pollution reduction estimate data. We think it would be helpful to incorporate some monitoring to demonstrate whether the program is having its intended effect on a selection of farms. With that, I conclude the presentation. I'm happy to answer any more questions you have for me now or wait until after the agency has presented their remarks.
Thank you. Further questions, comments? Mr. Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. Just going back to just the appropriations, I know that if I saw correctly, in 2025, 3.5 million or so. Can you just tell us generally, the appropriation, what are the expenses with that? Is it all going towards producers, or is it a certain fraction of that that's going towards producers?
Ms. Anoni Wells.
All right. Chair Representative Lee. If you look at page 11 in the report, we have kind of a high-level breakdown of where expenses are going. So over a third has gone to the soil and water conservation districts, and staff at these districts, as we described earlier, are the ones who are largely providing certification services across the state. There's also expenditures for payroll and employee reimbursement for staff that work on the program from MDA's central office. And then there is also money that is going directly to producers to implement practices. There's a table on the following page, page 12, which describes the total financial assistance provided to producers through MDA from fiscal years 2017 to 2025.
Thank you. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that. And so, for me, I'm really more interested in just the piece around just protecting the public dollars, and then how some of the practices around using contingencies, where I think in the report you said that that's, there's not clear authority for that. And when I was looking at the response from the agency, I don't see the agency addressing where did they have the authority to implement contingencies. And so hopefully when the agencies comes up, we can have that discussion. And so with that, did you guys look at, of all the funding that went out to producers, did any of the producers that were not fully certified, that were on contingencies, did they receive any of the public dollars or not?
Ms. Anoni Wells.
Thank you, Chair Representative Lee. We did look to a limited extent at that. We did not report on it in this, in part because the way that MDA's grant is structured allows producers who are in the process of being certified and those who are certified to receive funds. So that does open up to literally any agricultural producer in Minnesota who has expressed an interest and begun the application process. So whether or not they had a contingency would be irrelevant in that case. And then we did not, I guess I will say that the other instances, the scholarship and incentive payments, those are the other forms that would rely on an individual being certified, in which case they would possibly have a contingency. So in those cases, we did see that some producers who had contingencies had received those benefits of the program.
Representative Lee.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And so hopefully at the agencies, when they come up, can address that too. I am concerned that, one, we're implementing a practice that's not authorized in statute. And then two, potentially what we just heard is that some of these individuals that, are on contingencies are receiving dollars through the program. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Representative Lee. Representative Jacob.
I think I want to speak to that in particular. I have not received a dollar from this program. And largely.
And how long have you been in it, Representative?
Since the inception.
Since the inception.
So I'm certified and recertified
Okay.
at this point. After 10 years, you have to be recertified.
Certified?
just looking at these numbers, the only incentive on here goes to climate initiatives of $143,000 out of that 3.5 million a year, so
What
that,
page is that on?
that's on page 12. That's the only direct payment that's coming out to the farmer out of this program. So it's just the majority of it is in the implementation of the program. That's where the money is being spent. It's not being given out to producers.
Thank you. Anything further from members? Representative Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think it's important to, again, go back into history a little bit. So this program was originally proposed by coming from the Obama administration as an idea of working on voluntary practices. And it took a chair to sign an agreement to work on that. And so once in 2013, when control changed, Gene Wagenius, there's a photo I could find you, of signed the agreement. And as I mentioned, there was opposition. And during that time, the original proposal was to sell it as anti-regulation, that instead of regulation, we would have a voluntary recognition and certification, but not a regulatory certification.
Which doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't going to
No.
be rigorous.
Right. And then it changed to the peer benefit. That was used as people can see that you're doing something and there'd be peer pressure and pride in doing this and causes you to do more. And then there was you can use the certification to help market, that selling ag water quality certification products would help you in the market and give you a market advantage for that. And then what we found, I think, through the evaluations by the department is it's a very good profitability management program, that it provides producers with technical assistance that helps them be more profitable because they're able to manage their inputs and their practices. But that's not water quality. And this is all funded by water quality dollars. And I think that's the question that's in front of the legislature is, what is this doing for water quality? And I would go broader than just clean water here, because I think the other funds also use as measurements the number of people who participate, the number of dollars that are spent, the number of acres that are enrolled, or in outdoor heritage, the number of acres that are bought. And there were extensive debates. We actually funded plans in many of these areas so that we would have the measurement, the baseline to do that. And we've funded more monitoring than any other state in the country to look at the impacts on water quality. And we cannot measure whether this program, and I would even say the programs that Representative Jacob, all of these practices that we are funding, are they making a difference? Because changes occur in the landscape as well. So as we move towards renewal in 2032, where people are already meeting to try to renew the money, the Constitution Amendment, I think there's some very serious questions that this type of rigor on program evaluation actually should be funded out of these constitutional dollars, that Clean Water should look at evaluating, that there should be an evaluation component so we have measurement of, are they working? And I'll just go on a side tangent. Does buying 10,000 acres over 10 years, does that do anything for outcomes in terms of helping wildlife and water quality?
So Representative Hanson, would you see that as a jurisdictional matter that should be undertaken by the committees with jurisdiction over agricultural policy? Or does it do these 50 programs that he brought up, that Representative Jacobs brought up, do each one of them It should be examined by the Legislative Audit Commission?
Well, we
And
have-
you can hear the skepticism in my voice.
Right.
I say no. It should be part of the responsibility of the ag committees.
Well, we actually created these citizen stakeholder groups that make recommendations. And I would say this is a flaw of the Clean Water Council and the Outdoor Heritage Fund to not do evaluations, to just shovel the money out, divide the pie, and shovel the money out. And so we set that up by statute. That's our responsibility as legislators. And because it's a piece of pie, this original appropriation was when the environment and the ag committees were combined. And so it came through the Environment and Ag Finance Committee. So there's ag pieces, there's Bowser pieces, there's DNR pieces, there's PCA pieces. And then if you've got any of the local jurisdictions that Representative Jacob mentioned, they could apply for some of this stuff too. So there's the Vermilion River Watershed Management Organization. I'm just picking some off the top of my head. We set up these citizen commissions with essentially de facto authority to make recommendations to us. And having evaluations like this, I don't believe the auditor can and should do this. When we have done legacy audits, we've looked at the broad picture. But we have staff and we have members on these committees who could ask these tough questions. And then the committees of jurisdiction, which are all of them, and I think particularly as we march towards 2032 and the request for reauthorizing, are these working? And should they work? Or is there a different way?
Thank you very much. Going back to Representative Jacob and then Representative Quam. Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Rest. The amount of water organizations, and we did a presentation on this in Winona County called Water World, the amount of government salaries that go into all of these different programs. This is all about implementation. Now, it feels like we're trying to get caught on measurement. Well, the reality is we need to put as many best management programs on the ground in any way that we can through any program that we can. And that's what this program is about, and that's what it's doing. And to try to come up with a measurement matrix and throw it into this, I don't think that was the original intention of this program. It's doing what it's supposed to do.
Thank you, Representative Jacobs. I really appreciate your comments. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, getting back to the entity that we're looking on the audit of, I think we've got consensus that we need clarification to allow the appropriate interaction and assistance, advising, however you want to put it, for this agent. When we do that, we also need to look at consolidating. The biggest problem that we find in our government are we've got multiple people and agencies doing similar things, and there's an overlap and some contradiction. Well, I think a consolidation, when we're doing this legislation, would be good. The other thing is uniform testing. In that way, if we got 5 different entities that are testing water for different reasons, et cetera, we have a uniform testing, so we get that baseline that we're basically missing. But being on the committee, we've got the things to do to this, but while we're fixing or improving from an audit, we need to look at the related activities. And so I hope that comes out. There's a few of us that will be back in January, probably, and we need to come together and do it. We have these meetings, we come up with good ideas and suggestions. They don't always get down into a bill and get heard in committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Quam, and for those of us who will not be here, we're going to be watching Okay, we're going to be watching Representative Lee, Representative Hanson, Representative Jacob, Representative Quam, Representative Anderson, and I, Senator Drazkowski, we're going to be watching. Okay. Any further comments before I invite Commissioner Peterson to the witness table? Seeing none, thank you very much for your report. It has, since it was, published kind of quietly, it has brought about a lot of discussion, not only about water quality, but about the future of the amendment. And by looking at these things now, it seems to me that the legislature, when it moves forward with renewing the amendment, that it's going to do so with intelligence and with a lot of input from the public as well as from legislators at the time. So we do very much appreciate the work of the Legislative Auditor's Office and yours in particular for kind of being the spark in a report like this that brings about this kind of wide-ranging discussion. So thank you very much for that.
Thank
So
you.
Commissioner, if you would like to join us. Commissioner, before you begin, I want to just acknowledge that I, for one, enjoyed your commentary in the Star Tribune. I only get the paper edition, so I don't know when it was online, but today it was in the real newspaper. So we appreciate the work you did for that and its publication. Welcome to the committee. If you would identify yourself for the record, and then we'll turn to the Assistant Commissioner as well. Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Tom Peterson, Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Excuse me. Peter Chesset, Assistant Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
Thank you very much.
Start with my comments.
Both of you.
Ready?
So who was
Okay.
going to begin?
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I appreciate your comments. I also heard from my mom, also appreciated that this morning, so that was nice to hear. But I want to first start open by thanking the Office of the Legislative Auditor, Director Randall and her team. It's not always our favorite thing, but, audits I've learned are necessary and they are helpful to agency to look through and kind of help us inform and make decisions to that. But I want to thank them for their work in it was a long audit going back and forth and everything, but I appreciate their professionalism and the importance of it. As we heard today, and I'm going to switch up a little bit and try to answer some of the questions within my testimony. So I'm going to call it MOCWIP, Madam Chair, and so hopefully that doesn't change up too much, but that's kind of what we refer to it as. But it holds a distinctive place among Minnesota's water quality programs. Other efforts to monitor conditions and track trends, this is the only program built to drive comprehensive adoption of proven water quality practices across whole farms. It stands apart in another way. Other states face similar agriculture water challenges, but Minnesota was the first to step up and build a comprehensive program. As I travel in the country and meet with my other commissioners that have similar pieces, they wonder how we got this started. They look at trying to replicate it in some form, but we keep moving forward because this idea was right. We have new science, better tools, and the field of experience gave us way to sharpen the program. I was there in 2013 at the press conference with the EPA administrator, with the legislators. I worked on the program as the lobbyist for the Farmers Union for many years. I remember the first year when we had one farmer in the southern part of the state, and it took a while to kind of develop the program. But we continued to work on it and replace things. Early standalone tools have been replaced with integrated digital systems. Mid-certification reviews have been strengthened. Certification standards have been tightened. And we've updated best management practices and incorporated assessment and certification tools into that. You know, and I also think that as program matures, those are things that are helpful for us to look at. We're at the 10-year point in that, as Representative Jacobs said, as we're starting to recertify folks, it helps us and we learn things from that. As commissioner, I take the recommendations of the auditor seriously, and we work on addressing those and trying to make those things better. During the audit period, we continue to improve the program, including several items noted in the report. We have made sure that all certifiers are audited, which is one of the pieces in there. We have prioritized mid-certification reviews for producers that we would say are at high risk and for noncompliance. We've also continued to work with our nutrient reduction accounting metrics, increase with the MPCA's best management practice effects estimator tool, or affectionately known as BEAT. Staff has also advanced internal planning work related to water quality monitoring and developed consolidated technical and policy guidance, refined structural practice contingency policies, and we've worked to strengthen administration of the program, which was another recommendation within the report. And again, as we say, we value these recommendations. And I always think on audits are interesting because when the audit's done, it's not done. You know, an agency has to continue to follow up and say, here's the steps that we've taken. They do check in, they follow up, and those are important things. But we've already taken several steps to complete many of the recommendations within that review. As requested, we are also defining additional limitations on structural practice contingencies and related certifier guidance. And with assistance from our water quality monitoring team, MAQUIP is drafting a proposal for the Clean Water Counseling addressing what monitoring plan would look like. I do want to just address a couple of things that were said or as we talked to in that. One thing is modeling versus monitoring. This kind of gets into, you know, does this have an impact? Is this having an impact on that? MAQUIP follows the same established scientific framework used across all Minnesota's regulatory and voluntary conservation programs. It relies on the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy and the University of Minnesota's peer-reviewed practice effective research, the same scientific foundation used by the MPCA, Bowser, and the DNR. Minnesota conservation programs operate from a common scientific foundation because effectiveness of those practices is not speculative, it's established. Cover crops, buffers, nutrient management, water and sediment basin controls, we know they work. The question is not whether they succeed, but whether we will continue deploying them at a scale needed to protect our water resources. Field level sampling, as we get into, such as tile or edge of monitoring, is highly sensitive to short-term weather, to site variability. While this work is necessary to help calibrate and help us with models, it's expensive. It's challenging to conduct, and it can take a decade or more to assess a single agricultural parcel. Conversely, well-calibrated models, and you can just look at everything that we have now, update our models, even since I've started as commissioner, we can predict the average pollution reduction estimate generated from those proven practices on thousands of simulations instantly. This is why Minnesota applies scientifically based modeling across its conservation programs. However, MDA is a leader too in our collection of edge of field data on working farms, and this data supports the development and calibration of the same models used to track water quality across Minnesota and the country. We have 14 certified farms, for example, that are part of our edge of the field monitoring program, and with some locations dating back a decade or more. I also wanted to talk about the contingencies, and there's a lot of discussion about that. Every parcel, rented or owned, must implement a defined set of conservation practices aligned with Minnesota's water quality goals before entering the program. So we define them. Producers must follow management practices, standards for fertilizer use, tillage, pesticide application, tile drainage, irrigation where present, and agree to a whole field conservation practice. And to Representative Lee's point, as a reimbursement program, the certification producers that receive payments only after fully implementing the program. So they implement the practices, they provide receipts, they document them, they get paid. And so that they may have a contingency, but they don't get their dollars until, and that's the way our agency works. A lot of our grants and dollars is through reimbursement, so we're guaranteed that the practice is actually put in place. The program restricts reimbursements too to a maximum of $5,000, capped at 75% of the total expenses. On average, 95% of the producers, Representative Jacobs says, do not seek or receive any financial assistance annually. I'd also say the certification is not symbolic. I'd also say that on the contingencies, this is a contract the farmers have signed. And since the audit came out, I've had farmers contact me and say, kind of read the report like they weren't going to honor their contract, and they said, hey, I'm honoring my contract, but I am switching from beans to potatoes or potatoes to beans, or I am waiting for my EQIP contract, but I'm in the process of it. I got it started this year. I'll have it all done by next year. Like they kind of, I said, no, we got that. We know that, and I think that's really important to talk about those benefits that the farmers are doing in implementing all of their commitments, and gives us leverage to that. And as noted, in the case where they don't, on page 33, it actually talks about where we rescinded a farm's conditional certification on noncompliance, and that is a rarity. I'd also just want to cite one piece in the OLA report on page 39 of an unmet standard case involving a contingency. Practices that must be implemented as weather, crop conditions, rotations, and other factors that allow. The producer cited implemented 8 of 8 new water and sediment control basins and 32 of 33 grass waterways, with the final one scheduled. That's not a failure. That's amazing. This is a significant conservation success in this part of the state. Contingencies are also a standard use, not just of MDA, but the USDA, the FDA, the EPA certifications, federal registrations, and nearly all commercial contracts. Our use of those squarely aligns with the norm. However, that being said, with contingencies and with recommendations from the auditor, we are examining places where we could strengthen the guidance and use of contingencies, and we'll continue to do that. And I don't know what I'll be doing next year, and some of you will be here or won't be here, but we want to work with the legislature to strengthen that in the next session and have that discussion. As I close, I just want to kind of remind that 53% of Minnesota's land remains in agriculture production. The future of our natural resources is largely decided on working farmland. Every conservation choice, every practice adopted or not, ripples across the landscape. When the majority of the state's water, soil, and habitat depends on agriculture management, programs that support farmland conservation must deliver the greatest impact. We believe that MOCWIP does that. An OLA survey referenced on page 55 shows benefits of the programs get high marks from the participants. Since the audit come out, I've been trying to get to as many farms as I could and ask them, how has this helped your farm? Seen it firsthand, as I've probably been to hundreds of certified farms. And really excited to see the ones that I've visited in the last couple of weeks.
Have you been to Representative Jacobs?
Yeah, I've never been to his farm, haven't been invited, so someday maybe, but I just, when you look at it, I try to go see where our grants and our programs are worked, and people are excited to show you and to talk about. We talked about organic, one of the last ones I went to in the Valley. He was kind of frustrated with the program, to be honest, because it's not easy to, if you're organic, to make some of those changes, but he really appreciated working working with the certifier and coming into compliance with that. And I will say too, I'm always clear, Representative Hansen, to your point, that this is a water quality program, because a lot of times it does get put out as a marketing program. That's a side benefit. There's great side benefits to this. That particular organic producer, he's up in the valley. He's a large-scale producer. He markets his own flax and other products, has a mill right there on his place, but he's very proud to say that this is a water certified and the steps he's taken. You can go to the St. Paul Farmers Market here and find it at a 3-acre farm of a producer who's very proud of the cover crops that they've worked into their farm. But 57% reported improved soil health, 56% reported improved water quality. Farmers can see that on their farm, and 52% reported less erosion. To me, those are things we can quantify. Where is the public getting a benefit from this program? The answer is yes. We have 1,900 farmers enrolled in this program right now. I had them pull up the numbers. There is almost 500 farmers that are somewhere in their stage of certifying. That's a lot. I was kind of surprised by that. I knew we had a backlog and we're working through that, but that's really exciting. That means maybe they've clicked on and started, or they may be a year into it and trying to look at it, but it shows significant interest in the program. I also, in the slide that the auditor had, I noted where a lot of the heavy certifications are. They're in Representative Jacobs' area. They're in the Central Sand Plains. Those are places where we placed a priority on it, where we have the high nitrates. Another piece to Representative Hansen's point on how long this has been going. This program is essential. The more farmers we get into this program, the more we know and understand, the more we can model, the more we can test, the more we can find pieces of that. We also have something called the groundwater protection rule, which references back to what Representative Hansen's saying. And that is moving along, where we have 30 DWSMAs, or drinking water surface management areas, that are at a level 2, which means we're moving towards regulation. And I always remember when I was a lobbyist, and I'd say, it's 8 years away. I won't ever have to worry about that. I didn't contemplate that I might be commissioner someday, and actually moving towards a regulation where we have to clean the water up and we have to remove nitrates from those drinking water surface management areas. And MOQUIP is one of the tools we're using with the farmers in those districts to get buy-in to help us move forward into cleaning up those pieces. So again, I just want to thank you. I'm glad to take any questions. Hopefully I've tried to answer as many as I could as we went through that. Very proud of the program. So proud that I'm missing the opening day of Farm Fest for the first time in 25 years.
We appreciate that.
But I believe strongly in being here and talking about the program. I appreciate the opportunity. And I don't know if there's anything I missed or
Anything further, Commissioner Kelseth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Peterson did an excellent job with his overview. I would just like to also briefly just thank the OLA for the process that we've gone through with them for a little over a year now. We know we have a strong program here with certification, accomplished a lot in a decade plus, but that doesn't mean that we can't improve upon the program. We can't enhance an already strong program, and it was really helpful to have to work with the OLA on just evaluating the program and to make it stronger. And then I just say, I think this report is important because it's going to spark a conversation that we've already seen here in this committee, and that is, to Representative Hansen's point, about how are we evaluating these programs? And when it comes to non-point source pollution, there are challenges. It's a challenging space to work in, and be it monitoring and modeling. There are a lot of good questions to be asked, and important conversations to have in order to see if we can improve on, say, Minnesota's nutrient reduction strategy, because the challenges raised by this report are not unique to the certification program. they exist enterprise-wide when we're talking about working in this particular space. But just, we welcomed this audit from day one and have really appreciated the process and OLL's professionalism. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. And we have heard from their testimony, it does have an acronym, MAQUIP.
MAQUIP.
So, but before I turn to the members, I would draw your attention, members, to page 10 in the report, which does show the number of MAQUIP certified acres by county. And in southern Minnesota, I notice there's one that's that is not colored, it's plain, which means that it has 0 to 1,000 acres. And I was just wondering, what is that poor county that doesn't have as many in southern Minnesota as everyone else? I mean, I can understand the metro area a bit, and those two counties are, what are those two counties? Anoka and Ramsey. There are some, it appears, in Hennepin County, which, and Dakota County. But what's that one, and I understand why they're not in the northern counties, but the way far northern counties, but what's that one?
Or Sibley, maybe? Sibley? No, Nicollet? Nicollet, okay.
So which county is it? And why, do you think? Why, Commissioner Peterson,
Well,
why?
you know, and
What happened to
frankly,
those people there?
Madam Chair and members, frankly, I'm a little surprised if it is Nicollet too, because, you know, I know farmers, maybe they're in the process of signing up. A lot of times, you know, one thing that's really important to this is your soil and water districts, and not to get into funding and more, but having a well-funded soil and water district, and thank you to the legislature for working on that. It really varies too, because that goes to the county commission and how they fund it. But you can see that even in my own county, in Pine County, once our, you know, county put more into that, you know, and we have staff and they're able to work with the NRCS, we were able to see a boost in working with farmers and getting that out there. So there's different reasons for that, but I would hope that we have folks getting into that. But a lot of times it's pieces like that.
I would too. So for comments from members, and I'll start with Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Rest. And I'd say probably early on in the program, it probably wasn't realized that there was going to be this type of evaluation all those years later. And I noticed that where they started the program was the very most challenging topography in the state. Wow. So where I live, altitude on my farm from my bluff top where my house is to my lowest land, 500 feet of elevation on my farm. So this is the towering bluffs of Winona. That's where I live, the most challenging property in the state. So they were focused on doing the most good they could, the most effect that they could get out of the dollars spent. So they went after that. Now that didn't put a massive amount of acres in, because they could have just went to the flattest land in the Red River Valley and certified countless acres. They didn't do that. They went for the challenging areas.
Challenging.
And I commend them for that. But I want to bring up that in 2024, and you are invited to my farm, Commissioner Peterson. But in 2024, Governor Walz came into my district, and he really was celebrating the reaching 1 million acres on the Ag Water Quality Certification Program, because as we discussed, it was originally an Obama program. And when he had this celebration in my district, I did not get an invitation. And having been a proponent of this, actively involved in that, that's how it was. But, and I'll say right up front, I do not approve of the use of contingencies. That was never part of the program when I was involved in it in its infancy. But I'm wondering, were you ever pressured by administration above you to figure out some way to inflate these numbers so that you could get to this 1 million acre mark? And did that affect your policy?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chair and members, or Representative Jacob, first of all, I'd like to apologize for that. It's frustrating to me sometimes when politics get in the way of programs, and to me, this has never been about politics. As Chair Hansen mentioned, this has kind of gone back and forth between Democrats keeping it going or working on it. I remember Representative Torkelson, as chair, really had gotten and supported it. And, it's been really interesting. So I do apologize when that happens, and sometimes that's above me, but I do take that. On the acreages, no, and that's a fair question. But what I will say about that is that we had the 500,000th acre in 2019 in my district. And the one thing I've noticed about that is the farmer who we invited to that, or that hosted it, we invited several farmers in the area, and they weren't really sure what they were going to. They knew there was coffee and donuts and the governor. But the interesting thing about it that I noticed with those, neighbors of mine, because that's where I live, they're all certified now. And they all were there that day, and they asked questions about, like, what is this all about? And I started to see my neighbor who lives on the river next to me, put in cover crops to switch his no-till. And by the way, the certification program complements a lot of the other programs we have. Our Ag BMP loan, that has $100 million of loans out. Our soil health equipment grant, our one farmer, he decided he wanted to get into the program, but to switch to no-till, he used the equipment grant, and that was the incentive to also help. And so we have other programs where the dollars are tied to that. But the pressure is not from adding acres. The pressure I get is from, in your area, is do we tell producers to get into this program? Because we do have a little bit of a backup in it. How long is it going to take to get into that? And so we've been working through that in your area. And that to me is a positive. And that is the one thing that I don't want to rush certifications or anything, but that you can see having almost 500 people, those acres will come. Those acres are anywhere from 300. Senator Curran's not here today, I don't believe, but he's on the commission. I was just at probably the largest farm in our area in Isani in Chisago County, just certified, and to see what they've done on their farm and how they've totally changed in the lakes they farm around, that's where the pressure point is for me. But I appreciate you answering that question, asking that question.
Thank you. And to the point, Representative Jacobs, to not being invited. I mean, I've been here some 40 years. I can't tell you the number of times I was not invited when a governor of either party was present in my district. And what I usually ended up doing after I found out, like the day after, was to call their office and just say, would you mind, at least letting me know that they're visiting a school. I don't have many, I don't think I have any farms, but would you mind just letting me know? And I have found that making that call has generally gotten the response of, yes, in the future, you will know when the governor is going to be in your district. So your experience is not unique. So further comment? It's Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner. I appreciate, you've watched some of the other hearings where there may be agencies that disagree strongly with the auditor, and it's kind of a rebellious discussion. So I appreciate that you're praising the auditor and the work that was done. I think two things can be true at the same time. One is that participants can be very proud and can see the progress of their practices. I think that can be true. I think that people can have pride in their implementation and enjoy working with the staff and enjoy, talking to the neighbors about that. But it can also be true that it may not have an impact on a large scale. And that's been the crux of the challenge since 1989. And you and I think I've raised the issue, it would be 20 years since the Groundwater Protection Act, and then it was 30 years since the Groundwater Protection Act, and now we're moving on 40 years since the Groundwater Protection Act. And the law is that we are not supposed to degrade our groundwater unless practical. And so we've tried many, many things. And I understand the argument of we need to give it time, but as you said, we don't know how much longer we're going to be here. 40 years is a long time. So how do we actually implement that change? And thinking about all the agencies that have been in front of us over the last 4 to 6 years, I think if some of them had said we're going to need contingencies on implementation or give us more time, there would be a whole different response to that answer. And because of the respect that both parties have for you in getting things done, I think that there's a different response today. But it still leads to that question about the outcome. And we had, I looked in here in 1989, we had monitoring. We've had baseline, Representative Quam, we've spent millions, probably hundreds of millions on study. We've done nitrate water testing clinics since the 80s. At the end of the Dayton administration, we did township level monitoring on nitrates, and I think we ended that. Maybe I'm wrong on that, and then we've had new chemistry come in. If we look at the pesticide things that didn't even exist in 1989, and we're finding them in water and air now. So yes, things change, but the answer is always still give us more time. People like the program, it works well, but then how come we still have the problems after hundreds of millions of dollars? And my point is, I think that this program continuing will continue to be used to say we can't use the stick anymore. We can't use the stick. You're right. The nitrate stick of regulation was this is going to be 8 years in advance, and it still takes the time. But when somebody's out speeding on the road, we don't give them the cost share of the management or the education. Eventually they get a ticket. And so I think we're spending maybe, $200 million a year of legacy on clean water. It climbs because the sales tax revenue climbs, and a variety of things. And how do we actually achieve that? And I don't think it's going to be by a task force or a stakeholder group or any of that. It has to be with some decisions and accountability and will to actually follow through. And so I appreciate your comment, but I also think we've expended a lot of money. And this is getting very old now. And the people who were around either in '89, there's fewer of us around that were here in 2013. And so we just keep repeating things if we don't actually make some progress. So I know that's a lot, but thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hansen. Anyone else? Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Rest. I was not complaining about not being invited.
It's okay. I did.
I am
but
a
you're
master
very
of one.
gracious.
I'm a master of one-upsmanship. Commissioner Peterson let me know he wasn't invited, so I had to let him know I wasn't invited. And furthermore, Representative Hansen held up his 1990 document. My first document, 1951, Soil Saver of the Year, my father. So in some of the toughest topography, again, in the entire state. And with that, my well tested 0 nitrates in one of the highest nitrate areas of the state. So, but also I'd like to point out in this study, 4%, we only have 4% of the acres certified. Well, to me, I would consider that to be a huge win because they're 4% of the toughest acres. And once again, we didn't go out into Red River Valley where it's as flat as a pancake. If we were just trying to make numbers look good, we could have done much different than what we did. So I applaud all that. And on all these 50 water organizations that I talk about, Commissioner Peterson and the MDA, Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and I did sit 10 years as a liaison to the Soil and Water Conservation District in Winona County. Willing participation is key. As soon as the government comes in and says, we're the enforcer of water regulation rules, farmers are going to all just like close the door. They're not going to want to have any part of it. Okay, make us do what you're going to make us do. But right now, we have got great things going on. Farmers are the solution to the environment in Minnesota. I lead as by example. Come and look at any aspect of my farm. Couldn't be more proud of it. So I'm proud of the work being done here by the MBA.
Thank you, Representative Jacobs. And I actually, as a suburban legislator, couldn't agree with you more about the role and the contributions that have been made by the agricultural community. And in this one-upsmanship thing.
Here it comes.
Yeah, okay. And then we will, and then before anybody else gets in, we're going to adjourn after I speak. Commissioner Peterson said that first time in 25 years that he was not at the first day of Farm Fest. Thursday is going to be the first time in 42 years that I have ever gone. So with that, we thank the commissioners and we thank the legislative auditors staff. Thank you very much. And the commission stands adjourned.